All right, we have one final guest of the evening. This is someone who I've never spoken to on the show. I've never actually had a conversation at length with this human before, but I was always going to get her. And I'm so excited that she is here tonight after a very busy day, bopping around the Seacoast with all the various Juneteenth celebrations that we have had here. She is the first Black assistant mayor in the history of Portsmouth. She's the owner of B.I.P.O.C downtown, and she's just an all-around badass woman. She's the one and only Joanna Kelley. Please clap it up for her. So excited to talk to you, Joe.
Hello.
You didn't bring espresso martinis for us.
I did not. Fun fact to start this off, because I like to start things off with fun facts. I don't drink coffee. There's the age-old saying, don't get high on your own supply. And I take that quite literally.
Why don't you like coffee?
So I don't know. As you can see, there's a lot of pep in my step, so I don't always need the caffeine. But in reality, it's kind of a crazy story. I grew up a little bit in and out of foster care, but with my grandparents, and my grandmother only had an 8th grade education, and what she did was work at Dunkin' Donuts. Way back in the day, some of you guys may remember, they actually used to bake the donuts in-house. Actually, in Portsmouth, the lead bakery was the Lafayette Dunkin' Donuts, the one across from Planet Fitness. And my grandmother worked there. That's what she did. She would go in at 11 o'clock at night and get out at like 7 in the morning. So she'd always come home smelling like coffee. And I'd be like, ugh, I hate this smell. And there's a much longer story, but you know how there's so much science that ties memory to scent? Well, my grandmother sadly passed away very suddenly in 2016. And then in 2017, I got the idea to do Cup of Joe, opened it in 18, and I'll never forget one of the first days opening, and then I went and saw my grandfather, and he looked at me and he said, "You smell like your grandmother." I know I don't tell that story often because it chokes me up, but I still sometimes will like go home and I'll be like, "What is that smell?" And I'll be like, "It's coffee. It's me." And luckily I married a man who loves coffee, so he doesn't mind it so much.
Now, common business advice, if you're going to start a business, it should be in something that you love and you're passionate about.
Yeah.
And you did not do that.
Well, I would say I did. People love coffee and I love people. And so, right? I heard you. So it made sense when I was in a corporate career and I wasn't advancing and I wasn't happy. And I was not really born a restaurant kid. My first job was at the Wooden Spoon in Rochester. And I'd always been in the hospitality world. I actually kind of fought it a lot. I was like, I can't be a waitress for the rest of my life. I can't be a bartender for the rest of my life. I need to get a career. And so when I wasn't happy with my career, I'd always stayed bartending in the summer. We know like the money can be really good and it gives you a lot of freedom. So then when I wasn't happy with my career, I said, well, maybe I should go back and do this. And I was kind of looking around, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I knew I didn't want to do a full-scale restaurant. That just isn't in my wheelhouse. I think you really have to be, someone with a chef background and a cooking passion to kind of do that. And I was like, that's too much for me. But I knew that people loved coffee and I loved people. And so I said, why don't I create that environment? I feel like, and I think a lot of people agree with me that, over the last 10 to 15 years, as our state has expanded, it used to be one of those fun Snapple facts. Like we had under 1 million people in the state growing up. We've gotten bigger, we've somewhat lost that sense of community. And I really wanted to create a space that felt like a home, that felt like a second space. So while coffee isn't my passion, I made sure to get educated in it. And team up with a really amazing roaster, and learn all of that knowledge. But I didn't need to learn people. And so that made the transition pretty easy.
Now, it's interesting that you say this because you're a lifelong New Hampshireite,
yeah.
Right? And me being here 2 years, all I see is community. All I see is people getting together with people. But you say before Cup of Joe, you didn't really think that was the vibe.
Well, no, I wouldn't say that. I would say especially I think as downtown Portsmouth. People forget Portsmouth was a very seedy town, right? Like there were biker bars on Bow Street. There were topless bars on Bow Street. There were, yes. Well, yeah.
What was that? What bar? The Cave?
Yeah.
Wow. Right.
And then prior to that, there was the Elvis Room. There were these very specific places. So when I say community, I really meant like gathering places. As town was changing and it was more high-end retail and high-end restaurants, we were losing that place that you could go get a glass of wine for $7, which you still can at Cup of Joe. It's not going to be that great, but you still can get it. And the affordable place to hang out all day. And I don't speak ill of the dead, but like breaking new grounds was great for what it was, but you couldn't plug in your laptop, right? They started to cover those outlets. You started to lose these things that felt so integral to community in that aspect.
I want to speak of the dead quick.
Yeah.
Hearth Market. R.I.P. You being both a business owner in Portsmouth and the assistant mayor, you have a perspective on the makeup of downtown Portsmouth more so than anyone else. So, as you said, the landscape of downtown Portsmouth has changed a lot. It takes, I've heard, off the record from business owners, the amount of money that they pay in rent in downtown Portsmouth, and it's astronomical.
I'll tell you right now, I pay a triple net rate base of $7,100, which equals about $8,300 to $8,500 a month. That's a lot of coffee. And I think more business owners need to talk about it, because sometimes people will come into my shop and say, why am I paying $7.50 for an iced latte? Well, I pay my staff a livable wage. They get access to 401k. They get access to paid vacations. They get access to healthcare. And I have to make ends meet.
Why was that so important to you to give them all that?
Well, because again, I was thinking about that I should have been in the hospitality world from day one. I shouldn't have felt this inability to create a career doing something I loved. So it's important for me to put my money where my mouth is. And so it's important for me, if I am saying I want to create a career out of this, well, you shouldn't just have to be an owner. I mean, in reality, the percentage of owner to employee in the world is so vast, right? There's way more employees than owners. So why should owners make all of the money, right? So I wanted to give my staff what I wanted, right? I wanted benefits. I wanted paid vacations. And in an industry where turnover is huge, I don't have that problem because my staff gets paid a living wage.
Wow, that's incredible, Joe. It speaks to what you've built. So on an episode of season 2, I talked with Andrew Simonis of Simonis Realty, Nate Hastings of the Portsmouth Chamber Collaborative, and we were just trying to get at the question, what is going on in downtown Portsmouth right now? So many beloved stores and brands have vacated downtown just because they can't make it in Hearth Market, especially as we're entering the summer season, to have that massive building that was built for this very specific purpose, to now have it be vacant is a huge eyesore for the summer. And I'm hearing rumblings about what could happen with it, but none of that is final yet. What is going on, in your opinion, in downtown Portsmouth? Why are all these businesses and brands that we love, why are they struggling?
Well, I think, it's twofold. I would say that we are really a population that hovers under 30,000. But we have an influx of people. On any day in Portsmouth, there can be roughly 60,000 people. In the summer, that pushes up to like 80,000. But what happens is that you have 4 months out of the year that most places are running in the red. And so if you have annual rent increases, all of that, it becomes too financially difficult to stay open. I will say, and I push back on this a little bit, is that I feel like for every store we see closing, we see a new one opening. A good example, and also I think, this is my little rant, I'm sorry. I think people are allowed to retire. I think we guilt people sometimes. We love something so much that we don't want to lose it. But I think like putting on the glitz is a really good example. A employee purchased it, and then after a few years, she was ready to retire. The business wasn't doing what she wanted it to do, and she was like, I'm in my retirement era. I want to go relax. I'm going to go do this. Well, now the owner of Pretty Little Things on Vaughan Mall is putting in a shop there. So you have this now kind of next wave. There is something to be said, and this is out of everyone's control. You know, as an elected official, people come to me all the time and say this, but I can't control market rent, right? And I can't control that we have created this kind of haven of the Seacoast that people want to live in. It's a good problem. It is a problem, but it's, you know, if we can tackle it creatively, it's a good problem to have. I mean, you can go to some of the, and this is no offense if anyone is from any of these places, they are lovely communities. But if you go to say like the tumbleweeds in the middle of nowhere, Maine, right? You know, this is a problem that a lot of communities wish they had, right? An overabundance of people visiting, an overabundance of people wanting to start businesses there.
So when, you know, we talk about solutions, right?
Yeah.
This is what you guys do as elected officials.
Well, do we? That's a nice thought.
You deal with solutions, at least you're supposed to. So when you guys are racking your brains about how do we fix this, tackle it creatively, what do you guys
you can't fix it. I think that as an elected official is my number one thing that I say to people. And they say, like, you need to fix this. And I'm like, how? You know, because in reality, I am a representative of people. So without people telling me and giving me ideas, and there's no one person that's going to solve any issue. You know, it comes down to a bottom dollar. And if somebody decides that they want a certain rent and someone's going to pay for it, there are creative spaces. You know, I'm bummed that Hearth is leaving because there was this big conversation last year about a winter market and getting that off the ground. And, you know, that kind of didn't happen. But we do have places like that Alyssa's creating that is happening.
And by the way, Alyssa, the second she closed that, she texted me and she's like, I want to put all of my businesses in there.
Yeah.
Just goes to show.
Yeah. But I also think that sometimes we forget that, like, the market just can't sustain things and we carry the burden instead of saying, okay, this isn't working. It's time to walk away from that idea. So much like the housing crisis that we have locally, you know, there's no one-stop shop to fixing it, but we as a community need to acknowledge that it's a double-edged sword, and then figure out what we do want. I hear all the time, you know, I tried to stay off some of the Facebook posts because it can get a little crazy sometimes. But somebody the other day was like, we should put a roller skate rink in there. And I'm like, we had one. It was called Happy Wheels. And it went under. You know, or someone said we should put an indoor kids gym. We had one, Rumble Tumble. It went under. So part of it is like, you say you want something, but you're only going once a week. Well, if we can't get 1,000 people to go once a week, the model can't make it. It's a great, we all have so many great ideas in our head, but can the model make it? And sometimes it can. And I think that's people's frustration most of the time when I hear it.
I went around town this past weekend at Market Square Day asking a bunch of people, business owners and strangers, what would you like to see go in Hearth Market?
Yeah.
If you could have it your way, Joe, what would you put in Hearth Market?
A parking lot? No, I'm just kidding. It was a parking lot, guys. I have no idea. And I don't, I have not really thought about it. I think anyone can say, like, an eataly. Well, that comes with a lot of issues because in my restaurant, in permitting brain, I'm like, well, that's one kitchen. How are you doing a commissary kitchen? Who gets to cook when? Diddy Burger's over here. This is vegetarian over there. Where's the ice cream? Who gets the locker? See, these are the things that everyone doesn't have to think about. So I'm not sure, but I will say, whether you like him or not, Mark McNabb is a smart businessman, and he's going to find a way. Like, that building's not getting torn down. It's still, we keep talking about it's vacant. Only the first floor is vacant. Right. You know, there's offices above, there's parking below. So I'm sure at some point the market will figure out and the community will figure out what it wants to support.
Well, I'm very curious to see what happens with it. Going back to Cup of Joe specifically, you walk in there and you'll immediately see a sign that says, drink coffee, fight racism.
Yeah.
Not your typical message at a coffee shop.
Is it not? That's weird.
Why was that important to you?
Okay, so some of you, was this before your time? When did you move to Portsmouth?
June 2023, 2 years ago.
So it was before your time, because February of 2023, there was a wave of vandalism in Portsmouth. We had a swastika spray painted on our door. So did the Jewish Temple and other businesses that had either pride flags or, which I always think this is an interesting tidbit, is that we have nothing on the outside of our store. And this is how I knew we were actually targeted. The other businesses had like pride flags hanging out or certain things, or obviously the Jewish Temple. We had nothing. If you just walked by, you wouldn't know we were a Black-owned business. You wouldn't know that we are a queer, like, safe space. But we were targeted. We were spray painted with a swastika and a Star of David. And I'll never forget that morning. It was a really crazy phone call that I got at like 6:15 in the morning, coffee shop life, from one of my staff members who happens to be like a non-binary person of color. And they were shaking and they said, there's this spray paint on our window. I'm scared. What do I do? And I said, just stay in your car. Like, don't do it. And they're like, no, I'm going to go in. Like, but what if they come back? And I'm like, do not move. Like, I will be right there. And I hung up the phone and then I called the chief of police and I said, hey, like, this has happened. At this point, we do not know that it's happened to anyone else. We do not know that this is a string of vandalism and hate crime. Let's not mince our words. Like, this is a hate crime that has kind of happened around town. So fast forward, we find out that there's several businesses in the church, the temple, that are affected by this. And immediately my brain goes into like, well, what can we do? And of course, people are calling me saying, well, what can I do for you? And I'm like, no. Like, I have grown up in New Hampshire as a woman of color my whole life. Like, I will survive this. Just read our Google reviews. I'll survive it. And so I talked to my friend Clifton, who helps run BLM Seacoast or New Hampshire now. And then my friend Mary, who's at the Lovering Center, Women's Health Center in Greenland. And I said, we have to be proactive. Like right now, we have to do something. And within 30 seconds, I said, we should send everyone flowers. Every business that was targeted, we should send them flowers in solidarity and say, hey, we see you, we stand with you, you're not alone in this fight. That quickly turned into, well, that's not a big enough statement. Let's have everyone bring them flowers. And then we're like, well, we don't want to financially burden anyone. So like, let's buy the flowers ourselves and then hand them out. And so we came up with this event literally in a 12-hour response time called Love Blooms Here. I don't know, did anyone participate in any of that? It was great. So we had we started calling flower shops and saying, can we buy a bunch of your cheapest flowers, like 1,000 stems? And luckily we had places like Wild Valentine and the Flower Kiosk and Flowers by Leslie donate a bunch of flowers. I think we had a couple thousand stems, and we put buckets out front of each of these businesses, and people came to Cup of Joe and they picked up a flower or several flowers, and they went to each one of these businesses and placed flowers on their door like a vigil. And it was the community saying, we see you, we hear you, this does not work for us. And I, on WMUR, just happened to say, like, can't everyone just, like, drink coffee and fight racism? And I was like, I should put that on a shirt. So we did. And so that is our shirt. But, you know, one of the things that I always talk about with Cup of Joe, and we get a lot of hate for that shirt, much like the disgustingly pro-women, we get a lot of hate for that
shirt. They make so much money on those things.
I need to print more. Yeah. It was not a marketing genius. Alyssa, I should call you. It was really important for me to create a safe space initially just as a woman. If you've been as a woman in the hospitality world, it's not the best. Like, I always say that you'll never hear a 45-year-old man say something so rude and snarky to an 18-year-old girl as you will behind the line of a kitchen in the middle of summer in downtown Portsmouth. And it's okay. But it's not okay. And so when I was creating Cup of Joe, I wanted to really create a safe space as a woman in the industry. And then that led, obviously, to a safe space for people of color, which then led to a safe space for the queer community. So all of these things were so unintentional because I just wanted to create a safe space for me in a world that I loved. And so it's become this beautiful, tiny with really bad AC. I wouldn't go on Tuesday. Really beautiful, tiny like mecca of this safe space for people.
Wow. Yeah, clap it up for Joe Kelley, everybody. There's so many more things I want to ask you. We clearly have to do a longer episode at some point, but in the interest of time, I want to ask you about, today is Juneteenth, and you mentioned in that story about connecting with the folks of BLM Seacoast. In your opinion, how would you assess the culture for Black people in New Hampshire on the Seacoast? How welcome do you guys feel? How bonded are you guys? I'm so curious.
Yeah. Well, I would say that I'm one. So I feel like that's a really hard question because it assumes or it insinuates that like it's a homogenous group of Black people that all just know each other. I'm biracial. I grew up in an all-white household with my all-white family. I'm the only person of color in my family, so I had a very different experience than, say, my friend Renelle, who grew up in Manchester, whose parents were immigrants from Ghana, and she grew up heavy in that culture and in a Black influence, and very, very different. So I always say, like, I'm Black for me, and I can't tell you what the story was for somebody else. For me, it's really interesting. I just did Creative Mornings in Portsmouth and told this story kind of for the first time that I didn't know I was Black until I was like in middle school. Obviously knew I was a little darker, but I was just like, I stayed in the oven a little longer. A little more. That was my grandmother would say. Totally not politically correct to say nowadays. But she's dead, so I can tell the story. Rip Joanne. But I truly didn't, and I don't say that it was a bad thing, and I don't say it was a good thing. I just say it was a thing. My grandparents were definitely not comfortable with Black people or people of different ethnic groups. That is how they grew up, right? They grew up in a very Irish, Polish, like culturally divided area in Massachusetts. Like the Blacks were on this side, the whites were on this side, the Polish were over here, the Irish were over here. Like there was just so really I think, my mom dated my dad to piss them off, and then oops, here I am. So it's been a really interesting, I've only really come into my own Blackness in probably the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, they look so great, but this is the third time in my life I've ever worn braids. And so there's things that you don't think about that are so different. If you're on TikTok, which I'm sure you guys are all too cool for TikTok, there's this big trend right now where if you're biracial, you're talking about if you had a white mom or Black mom, and people can like point it out. And it's not anything I ever thought about, but it is a lot to do with, say, your hair. Like the Black hair community, I don't know if you guys know this, but the Black hair community spends over $1.7 billion a year, like Black women. It's like a huge economic boom for the world. Like if Black women were like, I'm not doing that, like, see you later, L'Oreal. But so culturally, again, I can't tell you because I don't speak for every Black person in New Hampshire, which is, less than 1% of the population. But it's a question I get all the time, especially, I do have to correct you, the first Black elected deputy mayor in the state of New Hampshire.
What did I say?
You said just Portsmouth.
Oh,
this is statewide. Thank you. But again, even that comes with its draws, because for so long I was like, well, I'm not Black enough to represent these other people, which sounds so crazy. But again, culturally, I was not raised in that culture. So there's this big fear of rejection when you're trying, it's like trying to join the NBA as a 5'0" like Irish dude. You're like, what? How am I trying to do this? Like, do I belong? And you're trying to reach for something, but scared of being rejected by it. And so even now, I will have conversations with my friends where I'm like, I don't feel Black enough for this, or I don't feel like this, or it's a really interesting time. But as you and I know, like when we talked about doing this podcast, I said, I don't know if I want to do that on Juneteenth. Like, does that make sense for me? And when we talked, and I decided it made sense for me to reach out and talk to whomever, whenever. But today we celebrated Juneteenth in Portsmouth, and we had over like 500 people. And I'll tell you, like, maybe 5% were Black. And that's part of, the journey of this area, right? Like, I grew up in Rochester, and in my high school graduating class was over 600 kids, and there were 3 Black kids. In Portsmouth, there was just me as a Black-owned business. Then Southern Girl Bakery, amazing, came in, and now Maxology on Vaughan Mall has come in. Yeah, Max is great. So are Courtney and her mom. But it is it's an interesting time. I think people can sometimes get uncomfortable talking about race. But like, I think the worst thing that we've done as a society is shame talking about religion, money, and sex, because those are 3 pillars of our lives and 3 pillars of society. And if we can break down those stigmas, if we can talk about how I grew up in relative poverty, and so I will always support social programs like food stamps and Medicaid and housing for all, then you can maybe come a little bit closer to like a centralist idea of like, well, everyone on welfare isn't losers, right? If I can tell you that I had all of my stuff in trash bags at Dover Children's Home, then maybe you can understand that like housing is fundamental to people being able to get an education, to be able to get a career, to be healthy. So I think, those 3 things have pushed us so far apart, because we always say like, don't talk about those, don't talk about money. Well, I mean, my husband's a financial advisor, and he would tell you that a few years ago, like, I didn't have a good 401k. But that's because I come from a family that Social Security is our retirement. We work until you can get enough out of your Social Security benefits, which, again, my grandmother worked until, unfortunately, the week she died. You can get enough of your benefits to be able to survive. And so until you can talk about those things, you can't, if you didn't grow up with it, or if you didn't live it, or if you've never been exposed to it, you're not going to know.
I have one more question on this subject, and then we'll wrap up. Thank you all for bringing
You guys have been so patient, so good.
Yes, thank you so much. You mentioned that at the Juneteenth celebrations today that most of the people there were white. You're also throwing the BIPOC festival later.
Most of the people are white.
Later in August as well, where most of the people are white.
Yeah.
What and I can't see any of you anymore, but I think most of you, I assume, are white. What can we do as white people to make Black people on the Seacoast feel more loved, accepted, embraced, without pandering, without checking a box, without, virtue signaling?
Yeah. Well, again, I don't think all white people are homogenous in the way that they view it. I do think like allyship in general for everyone, and I say this with my full chest. That includes anyone currently in an ICE detention center. That includes anyone who doesn't look like you. We just have to like increase humanity and understand that, like, again, everyone's how do I say this in a weird live? This is going to be on the internet forever. Everyone's experiences are different. And my biggest thing, and I have only recently started to do this with people, is like, pay people of color for their time. Like, if you want me to come in and speak to your corporate office, great. Why would I do that for free? You'd pay somebody else. So because you want, your team to be more exposed to something, I should do it for free. Like, there's value in kind of creating partnerships. But I do have to give a shout out to the New England B.I.P.O.C Festival. This is our 5th year. Myself, Evan Mallett, who, if you're ever looking for like allyship 101, Evan Mallett from the Black Trumpet is amazing. And then Dave Vargas from Vita Cantina. And Marie Collins, who's a PhD student at UNH, started this festival a few years ago. It was in the Vita Cantina parking lot. And our idea, it came after the wake of George Floyd, where I was holding all these rallies in Portsmouth, and we were trying to figure out, like, what are we going to do? And Dave and Evan were like, we should do some type of festival. And I'm like, cool, chefs. And then they said, well, you need to help us. And so we came up with this idea of the New England B.I.P.O.C Festival to highlight people of color that live here, right? Because I think sometimes we forget there are people of color that live in New Hampshire. We are the whitest. I think right now us and Maine go back and forth, but we are one of the 3 whitest states in the Union, in America. Maine, Vermont, and New Hampshire. And so our idea was that we were going to show people that, like, these are the people in your backyard. Like, we're not bussing people in. And so our first year, we had 700 people show up, 20 nonprofits and restaurants owned by people of color, and we were ecstatic. We were like, this is the best. Last year, we had 5,000 people show up. Wow. And we were like, this is the worst. That was just kidding. And so it's at Strawberry Bank on August 17th from 12 to 5. We have amazing cultural performances, tons of restaurants coming in. And it's great. We have people come from all over New England. We have restaurants and nonprofits and retailers. And again, it's supposed to show you that, like, we have an amazing Jamaican restaurant in the mall that you've never, I'm sure you,
no idea.
You need to add your list. But we have, amazing cultural and restaurants around here, and ethnic restaurants around here, and you should know them. And so it's funny, somebody asked me one day, like, is that only for people of color? I'm like, it's the opposite. It is for white people to see everything else, to, like, taste amazing food from different cultures. And we've gotten a lot of hate for it. Some people have been like, that's so awful. I'm like, do you say that to the Greek festival? Like, nobody's hating, like, nobody from Irish descent is, like, marching outside of the Greek festival, like, where's my shamrocks? I can say that because I'm part Irish. But it's true. I mean, we've gotten a lot of hate. And it to me, it makes no sense. I'm like, we're a multicultural festival. Like, you go. If you haven't been, please come. We have kids just dancing everywhere. We have face painting. You'll try food from places that it's too spicy for me to eat. So I'll ask you how it was. But it's an amazing festival that we're super, super proud of. And shout out to Service Credit Union for that 4-year sponsorship contract. And a big part of it is that it is by donation only. So we ask for a $10 donation, and then all of the food is free. The bar is paid. But all of the food is free. So we wanted to have a low-cost, low-barrier experience for people.
Well, that's incredible. I can't wait to attend, and I can't wait to see a lot of you there. Joe, this conversation has been amazing. I have one final question for you.
I've had a long time to think about it.
Yes, we asked the same final question to everyone, and I'll ask it to you. If you were to leave this earth tomorrow, what would you want people to remember about you?
I said I had a long time to think about it. I didn't say I did think about it. First, I hope that people, I hope I create a legacy internally within my own family. I'm changing the tides of I do joke with my husband, like, what if we peaked? Like, what if it goes downhill from here? DNA-wise, that does happen, guys. But I have this awful habit where I make, he hates me about this. I, will put on a song, and then, 30 seconds into it, I'll pause it and be like, what did you just think that meant? Tell me what you think. No, you're wrong. That means this. And I did it on the car ride over here, and there's this song by this Irish singer that I saw at Prescott Park Arts Festival years ago, and he sings a song called Indiscriminate Acts of Kindness. It's a guy by Foy Vance. You should listen to the song on the way home. And it basically tells this story of this woman who was down and out, and it was a rainy day, and this hotel concierge lets her sleep in a room, and she's on drugs, and he's like, hey, I'll just sit here with you. And in the morning, she's like, hey, I wasn't always like this. How could you see past that? And he's like, it's indiscriminate acts of kindness. And so someday when I start a podcast, no, I'm just kidding. No, I might, who knows? I always say, I hope my legacy is that people remember me for indiscriminate acts of kindness. The $5 to the homeless man on the side of the road. I don't care if he buys beer. That's a hard life. I would be drunk too. Giving to gather, right? So that people can be fed. Donating your good used items to Operation Blessing instead of maybe Salvation Army, because I was a kid who shopped at Operation Blessing, right? So doing these things with nothing in return, and just doing things like, people hate me, but like if someone looks lost on the side of the road, I'm like, do you need help? What can I do for you? I'll walk you over there. But so that is a legacy I hope I leave, is that somebody will one day be like, she was just kind to be kind, man. Look, wackadoodle.
That's an incredible answer. Give it up for Joe Kelley, everybody. Wow. Thank you, Joe. I've loved this conversation. No, you're not done yet.
Okay. I was like, bye, guys.
Questions for a $50 gift card to the living room at Stages in Dover.
I got one.
All right, Beth.
What is your advice for somebody who wants to run for office?
Oh, yeah, we didn't even talk about any of that.
In their community in like an official capacity. What is your
Do
advice?
it. Do you live in Portsmouth?
I do. I'm not.
Oh, that's great. You should. How do you feel? Why not? Why not? I'll tell you, women need to be convinced. It took literally 5 other elected women to convince me to run for office. Women have to be talked into it, because we constantly say, well, I'm not ready. I'm not the one. Somebody else will do it. Someone else went to school for urban plan. You guys, I'm a college dropout.
Wow.
Hey, there you go.
I have a follow-up.
Oh.
Do it. That's my advice. No, but my advice is do it.
What made you want to do it?
I didn't. No, I literally didn't. Somebody saw me at a rally and they were like, you should run for office. And I was like, you're a wackadoodle. But now, this is all true, guys, uncensored. Well, actually, I haven't swore, so very censored. No, what made me want to do it is like, I didn't see anyone that looked like me. And that's physically looked like me, right? No, I'm just kidding. But, there were no people of color. Especially in Portsmouth, there were no young people. I just remember going to meetings and they were like, the service workers need housing. The service workers are poor. And I was like, you've never worked on a Saturday. There were all of these issues that were being discussed that were about me, but like nobody was in the conversation. But I will put this out as a shameless plug. Please run for office. It is not easy. It is some days. Last Monday, I went in at 5:00 p.m. after working a full day and got out at midnight. And it was horrible. And I came home and I didn't sleep until 2 a.m. and blah, blah. But then there's days when I can go into an elementary school and talk to these kids about their future and then go back and vote on something that is something that they came up with. And there's conversations in my head about running for bigger office and X, Y, and Z and trying to figure that out and whether it's for me or not for me. But my biggest piece of advice is do it. And especially we live in New Hampshire, so they're 2-year terms. If you don't like it, just don't do it again.
Thank you, Beth. Let me interject and ask. Seacoast Online came out with an article 2 months ago saying that you were weighing a run for U.S. Congress.
Yeah.
Where do we stand on that
I haven't officially ruled it out, but it's really been eye-opening, and this is why I say run for local government, because it's really a low barrier. Your time is the cost. I don't know if any of you know how much we get paid for city council. $75 a month.
now?
Exactly.
Crazy.
But what's crazy to me is when looking into running for office, I actually got a call from a friend of mine whose mother, he passed away a few years ago, we could not be politically more different. She is small town, ready, very red, and she said, I think you would do a really good job. And I was like, this is wild. And maybe I would. But what has kind of stopped me in my tracks is the amount of money you need to raise. So I was told by a consultant and people who have done it that in a primary, so before you kind of get these big national donations from your party or X, Y, and Z, this primary, you have to raise at least $500,000 before you get in it. And that is so intimidating.
Also insane.
Literally insane.
What?
Literally insane. And so, when I'm getting phone when I'm reading, some of the people who have announced that they've come out and said, I have already raised $400,000, or I've raised $500,000, and it's really intimidating. And I think sometimes we have this because we see it in bigger states, right? We see it in much bigger cities, that the AOC, right, the rise from bartender to congresswoman, and it's so much different. That's not correct grammar. It is very different in New Hampshire because we're such a small state and we only have these 2 seats in the House, and everyone only has 2 senators. So it's a much different race. I don't know if 26 is my time. I don't think I'm done doing the good I want to do in Portsmouth. I haven't, I want to get more housing bill. I want to really be part of the high school renovation. I want to figure out what we're doing with our accessible playgrounds. With Prescott Park, because some of you may know it's sinking back into the ocean because it's man-made. There's still things I want to do there. And I want to be in a place in my life that I feel comfortable calling somebody. Like the consultant was like, well, just call 48 people and have them max out at $2,600. I was like, who do you think my friends are? Like, I could have convinced 12 people to buy a ticket to come tonight. They're watching at home. But just do it. Sorry. Next question.
Okay. Well, we'll take one more question.
I'm long
in the front right here.
Okay. So
I can hear, can't see. Yes.
What helped you break out of the cycle of being in foster home?
Yeah. Well, she's here. Everyone give it up for Steffi.
Hey, Steffi.
Can't see her. She's in the back. So I always say one of the best things my grandmother ever did, and this was one of the benefits of being in, a ward of the state, is that I joined Big Brothers Big Sisters. Does anyone know that? Any bigs in the house? Matt? And I paired up with Stephanie, it will be 30 years ago. And she comes from a really amazing family. And I was able to see the other side of life. And I shared my first dance with her at my wedding. She is, in all essential terms, my mom. And I love her husband, and I love their 3 kids, and I love Gina. I just love her whole family. And they so much were like, you're one of us. That being said, there was, up until, just a couple years ago, so much I hid because I still felt so much shame of the things that I'm like, if she knows that this is going on in my life and I'm not just fun and cute and a cuddly little kid, she's not going to want me, right? Because that was my experiences from people. And it's been so beautiful in adulthood to be able to say hey, I didn't really share this with you. Here's why, but I want to share it with you now. And I think about sometimes how foolish I was, but I was an 11-year-old kid who didn't want to lose the only lifeline I ever had. You know what I mean? Well, some of you don't, so that's okay. But I would say that, and that's why I think, again, the indiscriminate acts of kindness, one person can change a life because one person changed my life, and then I became a big. And my little and I still talk, and they're kind of doing their own thing now. And I talk to my husband about being bigs, and I talk to my husband about becoming foster parents. And I always say Big Brothers Big Sisters because it's a very low time commitment thing, right? It's a few hours a month. When I first got paired with my little, when they were in elementary school, we would just walk over to the library. They would do homework. I was still struggling at Cup and Joe. So I would be doing my homework. We'd play chess and we'd hang out, and then I'd drive them home. So I shout out to that program. But I had a Stephanie, and I think every person here has the ability to be a Stephanie and should be.
Joe Kelley, everybody. Clap it up for Joe Kelley, the Assistant Mayor of Portsmouth, future President of the United States.